Hello, everybody. ODAT Nerd here, aka Terrence. This is the pre-recorded video that is going to play at the start of every Devember video. So, what day is it? If you're watching this on the day that I recorded it, probably a day in December. What day? I don't know. I'm not creating 31 of these things. This is to tell you that we are working on the Devember project, which is a remote build system in Sublime Text. Now, down in the description, if I have done my job correctly, there should be a link to the playlist that has all of the videos in this series, which starts with the video that describes what the heck it is we're actually trying to build here. And this video will be a minimum of an hour long. I don't know how long it's going to go because I haven't recorded it yet. It's still November right now while I'm reading this to you out of my brain. That's not actually written down anywhere. I think that's probably easy to tell. I'm not very good at talking off the top of my head into a camera. So what are we going to be doing tonight? Don't know. Hopefully working on something really interesting, though. Probably should have thought that through a little bit more. In any case, we're going to go ahead and say the following. If you like these videos and you want to know when there's going to be more of them, subscribe to the channel, link in the description. If you're interested in videos that aren't live in nature, there's another channel I have that is going to be providing those. I have in the past and I will again. I'm just not right now because I'm doing this every day for December and it's taking up all my free time. Link to that is in the description. Like any videos that you find useful, comment on any videos if you have any questions, and most importantly, have a good time. So let's go ahead and give it to myself in the present, if you will, to continue on faceless because I don't have the sort of setup that allows me to stream my face while I'm working. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sunday, December 16th, where we're looking at stuff and I'm being distracted by monitors on a work email slightly to my left. We think we all know the drill when it comes to weekends in Devember. I don't get a lot of time to do anything ahead of time, but I did already have a plan for what I wanted to work on tonight, so that worked out well. And I did think in my head a little bit exactly some ways that we might want to pull that out. So we can jump right on into that with impunity. First, I'd like to say that if you listen to the previous I don't know that I listened to the last night's devlog, but I did listen to parts of last night's stream, and I kept flipping back and forth between referring to the checksum as MD5 when it was SHA1 or SHA1. That's just because when it comes to checksums that I generally do encode, they're always MD5 checksums because they're for our own use, they're good enough for being able to detect if things like configuration files have changed and whatnot, because we're in a very constrained system. My brain just automatically goes to saying that even while I'm typing SHA1, and as I hear it, I cringe. And I should also point out that I did mention last night that we're not going to. The server is going to assume that what it has, as far as cache data, what it's being told is what it is, without having to recalculate it. That's not 100% true. And as a matter of fact, that is in fact not the case. That's just something that we're dealing with for right now. In the general case, you might assume that if we're sending files to the build server and then running them there and seeing what happens and getting the results from the console sent back to us, that's probably all we want. But you may want to take the artifacts of the build, like the executables that fell out or something, and sync them back down to your machine so you could do something with them. Because let's face it, if we had full ready access to a remote system, which we probably do, and we needed to build code there, we could just do it manually. We're clearly trying to do that through Sublime. We don't want to take that kind of time. But it's also possible for a build to modify itself, if you will, and in place something while it's, as a compile time constant. As an example, in the code that we work with, it has a version number that's in there that gets injected into a few places in the code. So when you build, the source files do actually change, and sometimes they get regenerated every time you build, and sometimes they don't. So we do want to have the capability to sync files down. And I also had the idea of being able to literally browse code on the server as well in a quick pop-up or something. That's just something that's down the line. That's not necessarily something that we realize we need it. We're just not doing it right now, if you will. And the last thing is a take on what we're going to do tonight. Before we get started in that, let's note how interesting it is that this is telling me that there's a modified file, even though I can't see it, which is neat. It's actually this file over here, because we modified our sidebar to move the remote build server. Even though the remote build server is actually in line in here, we've extracted it out into its own folder type object. I think that also means we don't need obj and bin in here. We just need those two, and that'll still work out because there's no obj and bin directories in our Python code over here, but everything else still portrays. And I decided, actually, while I was doing the devlog last night, that I actually want to keep that particular change. So I'm going to stage that file and say move the remote build server sidebar entry. And just a quick comment of this makes permanent a change we've been running with locally that makes the remote build server code appear as its own separate top level folder, even though it's still inside the package. And commit that. And we might even want to go one step further than that. I don't know. Actually, yeah, I think I am. One of the keys you can add to a project is a name field. And if you add a name field, whoops, it's used to name the folder instead of its actual name. So we're going to do that just because this is what I named my clone. And that way, if we do stuff like open a file, and well, I guess probably when we do copy file path, it actually still has the correct path in it. But at least, looking at the stuff here, it's going to mimic what it is on disk, which I think is probably a good idea, because at some point I'm going to forget that I did that. And instead, this way I'll be confused about this looking like this. We'll amend that previous commit like so. So what do we want to do? Now, the first thing I'm going to work on here is to fix this. And I'm using fix in very loose terms here. And that is basically to undo what we did here. So you can see this dictionary has two top-level keys. There's this one, which represents that folder. And there's all of the files that are in it, including their last modified time and their content hash and all of that business. And then as we get down here, here's another top level key for the remote build server because it's separate in the sidebar. And we note that this information here is exactly identical to the path of the first one up there, which tells us that this is actually inside that. So what I'd like to do is coalesce these entries together. And realistically, we do that in a generic way where we try to pull all of the potentially disparate things together into their own into a common folder, so that what we end up with is only multiple folder entries when they're actually literally different folders. And I'm still entirely unsure how much to support the idea of multiple distinct build servers, like or directories, I should say, because this is actually part of that. That makes sense. We've just sort of visually moved it out to make that code easier to manage for us. Does it make sense to have literally two projects in literally two completely different folders and allow you to push them both up and try to build inside one of them with one of them referencing the other? Now, up to now, that's not something I would do. Up to now, I've been considering it and assume that if you were doing that, your build system would know that if it goes down a certain number of folders, it can find that other one. So essentially, the onus is on you as the developer to know to set up these structures such as that. Um, we'll see how that plays out when we get into a later part. Um, but I do want to try to do that, and I want to do that here now, and then we're going to follow on with that to create a function that can take two dictionaries of this style here with multiple one or more top level entries filled with these, and then come up with the sync operations that if such as you will. So we might, for example, have a top level dictionary that looks like this as a result, where there's a top level key that says, okay, for this folder, and instead of and that its value would be a dictionary, but instead of it being filled with keys that are the name of the file with the values being that, there would be three top level keys: add, remove, modify. And the each of those three things would each be a dictionary, and then anything that was added would be these dictionary entries would be added to there. Anything that was deleted would be added to there, and everything that was modified would be added to there. Anything that's the same across both of them, we essentially do nothing with. Um, that's going to be the last thing that we do for now in the client code. In our ramp up to flipping back over to the server code to sort of re-implement in C# the stuff that we've been doing here in the Python, we're going to have to try and set up the server cache path um, and be able to scan through it for files and see what we can find, and then come up with a similar structure here. And we also then start working on the network protocol that allows the two of them to talk together, right? So the ultimate goal being, when you hit the build command, it creates the connection, it introduces itself and says, hi, I am a connection from Dart for this user with this password. I'm building on these directories. And the server, I'm using protocol version 1. Server says, go away, I don't like you, I don't know who you are, your protocol version is bad, your password is terrible, I don't like your folder, I think your shirt has a funny collar, any number of things, you go away. Or it says, okay, you're good to go. And now this one connection is going to be used for that build. And then we can dispatch a message to say, server, please tell us your file manifest. It comes up with one of these. At the same time, we're generating our own file manifest. We use that diff code we're going to write tonight, and then we are able to transmit data to the other side by saying, here is a list of things we're going to do. Please modify this file this way. Please add this file with this contents. Please remove this file. When that operation is done, the server has a synced copy of the code with us, and then we can go ahead and start working on sending our builds. Sounds real easy, doesn't it? I'm sure it will be super easy, he said with finger quotes and high drama on his face. So let us commence with the action, and I think I might be curious as to why that still has that. Do I have committed changes here? I don't think I have committed changes here. Does this not mean what I think it means? This contains modified files, does it? Because it doesn't look like it contains modified files. And this doesn't think it contains modified files. So that's kind of an interesting conundrum right there. Even this doesn't think it's modified. It doesn't think we're any commits ahead or anything. Just for giggles, I'm going to quit it and restart it. Keep in mind that that may well be a bug in this dev build of Sublime. It knew that that file was modified even though it wasn't visualized anywhere, so maybe when the state changed, it wasn't tracking. Make a note to add that or ask someone about it on the unofficial Discord a little bit later on. This is only like the second or third Sublime Text dev build that has this support built in. So I'm not surprised that there's still some growing pains in its code implementation. Hang on a second. I have some coffee. I think I used the mocha tonight. I would tend to agree with myself in that assessment. Okay. Um, Now, in order to do this, let's go ahead and discuss the overall plan, which I think I went over to last night, and that is we might say files.keys here. Did I? Maybe I'll comment that out and comment this. I don't quite remember the subtleties of what we were doing there. Okay, so here are. Oh yeah, we gotta turn off the word wrap in the console. Yeah, that'll also be happy. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, maybe it doesn't know how to encode a dict keys. I would have had to do something magic to it. All right, nah, that's neither here nor there. Here are the two keys. There's this one, and then there's this one that it looks almost. It is in fact almost this is exactly the same up to there, and then this part is the part that's not there. So realistically, what we want to do is first gather all of these files the way we are now. So what we're going to modify is going to be done in here. And we're going to go through all of the folders and come up with files. And then we're going to coalesce here. Did I spell that right? I don't think I did. Okay. We're going to coalesce files here and then return the result of the coalesce. And what does the coalesce do? It's going to take all of these keys, sort them into path order, so lexically with shortest first and latest last. I believe that is how we should go. And then we iterate through that sorted list, and we pull out the first one and say, of all of the keys that exist in the coalesced dictionary, do any of them start with this? And if so, which one? And I assume this is the part where I can't remember offhand if we do this shortest match or longest match, or sorted shortest to longest or longest to shortest, because I think we want to do this one first and then notice this one later, but we also want to make sure that if there's more than one entry, I think that's why we do it that way. Yeah. We start with this one and say, of all of the directories in the coalesced folder, did any of them start with us? And the answer is no, because there are none. So we just take all of these, this entry and all its keys in its dictionary just goes directly into the output with no further changes. Then we get to the next one and we say, for this folder, do any of the keys in the server, I see the word server there. Do any of the keys in the coalesced dictionary start with what we start with? And we say, yeah, now that you mention it, this one does. And if that's the case, then we know that this is the part that it starts with. So this must be the part that we are different from. So we would take this part off, throw that away because we don't need the leading path component. There's not a trailing path component there, so that's why there's a leading one here. So we throw the leading path component away. Add one to the end, and then iterate through this dictionary. And as we do, we modify the keys and the entries to have this added to them with that slash. And then we add all of those entries to there. So we have essentially coalesced them into one. And then we would go to the next one and the next one and the next one. And by the time we get to the bottom, when we're all done all of the folders, we've done as much coalescing of common things as we can. And the fact that we sorted them into path order means we should hit them in say, the best possible circumstance. Now, the other way to pull this off that occurs is to modify this, because, we are taking dictionaries out of here. We're getting the base folder and the dictionaries. Remember, before we made that change, we were just getting an array of all of the files in this folder, and then every time we got new folders, we would extend that folder and add the files there to the files that came from the previous folder. When you're done, you end up with one big long list of all of the files, but you've lost the what folder they originally were stored in, right? Which is one of the reasons why we don't do that. If we did that again and made sure that the file names in the array were all absolute, so they would all start with home T Martin local source Devember 2018, and then the names of the files, and we sorted that array by path component, we'd end up with all of the files all in one. And then we could try to do something like see what's the longest common prefix of path amongst all of the files that are stored in there, and break it down that way. And we'd probably want to do that in some sort of iterative fashion, because it's not necessarily guaranteed that all of the folders are related. Right now, this one is stored inside of that one. There could be a Devember 2017 and a Devember 2018 in here, and we want to send them both up for unknown reasons. They'll never coalesce. Um, and it can be tricky in that case, as I found out while I was doing other stuff, to actually be able to figure out what the common prefix is. Because if you're not careful, it turns out that the common prefix on a list of folders is the slash that's at the beginning, i.e. there doesn't appear to be a common prefix, and then anything that you've written to assume that you can find one doesn't work particularly well. So let us say we might return coalesce folders of files like so. And then this is going to be something that we can implement up here. And this may be, lending itself to trying to pull from or put things in different places or whatever. I'll add it here. So we'll we need another line there, and now if we just return files here like so, then everything still continues to work the way it always did. We might actually, in this case, say keys is equal to list of files dot keys, and then print keys. And then when you do it, ooh, that's not a thing that we can do, huh? Oh, then it's just a native list. Then we could jump down to the bottom, not that one, this one. And for the time being, well, we probably want to revert both of those back to the way they originally were, and then just comment that one out. So when we run the command, we just see the list of keys there. But we are still getting the same result out because we're just returning that dictionary, right? This function is inherently the world's biggest dumb way to print something and then just return it anyway. Given a dictionary of top-level build folders that has had its contents filled out, attempt to coalesce. Yeah, I know I wasn't going to be able to pull that off that many times in a row. Attempt to coalesce all of the child folders that appear into their parents. So in order to, this is code that I wrote, well, some time ago really, for override audit. I don't know if I actually have this bound to a key or not, or is there a command at the bottom here that I could use? Test command, huh? So here's what this is doing. Here's a list of every package. That's simple enough. You pick a package, you get to see the contents, and then you can pick a file in there if you want, and it says a selected README from automatic package reloader. Or you go again, pick default, and then send to trash, and then init, and you get selected init from default. It doesn't tell you the full path in its little testy thing here, but that's neither here nor there. So basically what this is doing is a version of this. It has a list of this, essentially. It doesn't get it from here. It actually gathers the list by looking inside all of the Sublime package files and in all of the package folders that are local as well. And the reason for that is because you can provide this command when you run it. An extra thing. I could say file type and we'll say overrides, like so. Now when I run the command, the only packages that appear are packages that have overrides in them. So let's say the Python folder. And the only file that's in the package Python that's an override is python.sublimebuild. Incidentally, these dots let you go back up too, as one might expect. And then it says we picked it. So this would allow you to prompt for only files that are overrides. Say if you wanted to diff an override or look at your list of overrides. You can also, as we can see in the code there, say non-overrides. And now lots of packages appear because this is all the packages that have files that aren't overrides. And I can pick Python again. And now of all of the files that you can see in here, you'll notice that there's no build file because the Python build file is the only file that's not an override, so it doesn't appear in this list. This is one you would use to pick if you wanted to create an override, for example. In any case, this is all a complicated type thing that I've been working on for enhancing override audit, but we'll see more about that in the next year's thing. That's not what this stream is about, but you can browse for resources. You can also browse for packages and for certain types of overrides. And somewhere in here, if I'm remembering correctly, is the bit that, yeah, this takes a list of all the package files in the dictionary and describes their logical layout. So this is actually something that can take a list of files that looks like this and blow it out into a thing that says, okay, there's a top level folder called default, and inside that here are some files, and inside that there's also some folders, and inside those folders there's also some files, so that you can navigate it. And I think somewhere in here is this magic right here, which, as my good friend Keith Hall will know, I spent a couple of days trying to figure out what the best possible way to do this was. And this is, I would imagine, a good example of the way that I work with stuff. I wanted to be able to take a list of files and explode them out into stuff. And I started with, much like we're doing in this Devember build here, a way to that sort of did what I wanted, and then I identified some problems and I fixed those problems, and eventually I got it into something that worked. And then I just slowly went over it and refined it and said, what if I did this? What if I did that? Based on what I've learned, my expectations for how this should work are different than what they actually turned out to be. I bet you I could do this instead of that, and boom, we end up with this tiny thing that does pretty much the whole shebang. Unfortunately, it looks into override audit to pull various things out, which means that it only works with override audit version 2, and I'm the only one that has a copy of override audit version 2, unless you clone my repository and use the master branch instead of the stable branch. But this sorts a list of files with something that first sorts by the directory name and then by the base name. I imagine we're going to want that more than one time. So I'm just going to copy that and bring it over to here. And I would again also imagine if I said this was, I'm going to call this file list, let's say, or folder dict, because that's actually what that is, right? Folder dict. If this was files, then we could print files. And how was I calling that? I can't remember. Sorted. Does sorted do it in place? No, I think it returns a new one. I'll just print that for the time being. And then we got to remember to return folder dict when we're done. Otherwise, things will go all doolally. Oh, right. I had some magic imports here to make that short. Maybe I don't even need that. I believe I imported them that way instead of just using them so that it would all fit nicely here. I might just pull that here like so. Yeah, and see in this case they both end up to be in the exact same order, which is neither here nor there. But if we were to take this and move it up here like so, the order of the items in the sidebar changes. And then when we do it, oh, yeah, the keys are not necessarily in any sort of imposed sorted order. Yeah, should have known. In any case, we can verify that that actually works in other ways. I believe we could say reverse equals true. And then when you do it, the files come out in the opposite order. So we see that they're actually sorting the way we expect them to sort. So the real question is can we certainly don't want that. We want them to be sorted this way. But could I do this? Yes, that still works. Okay, so we don't necessarily need to do that per se. We might say for folder in that, and now it's already too long just the way it is, which is unfortunate in the extreme. We'll print folder, and then we still get those things in that nice little order. Now we might say fixed is a dictionary like so. I'm not entirely sure what the best way to go for this is, because essentially what we're trying to do is take entries from folder dict and add them to fixed, and then return that back. And it would by definition be fixed because we're fixing it. And it's simple enough in the 2-entry array. So for folder in, maybe we want to, maybe we'll say folders is equal to this, because this is kind of ugly to look at as one big thing. It still doesn't quite fit, but for folder in folders, maybe it looks nicer. I mean, it still compiles. We need to say, do we need to keep a sorted list of the folders that we have and haven't dealt with yet is the question. Can you modify a dictionary while you're iterating it? I bet you that's a bad idea. Let's see what Stack Overflow has to say. Do do do. I'll go so far as saying it does it for KV and items. I can't remember, but okay. I'll click that link and see. The objects returned by keys, values, items are view. They provide a dynamic view, which means when the dictionary changes, the view reflects the changes. Dictionary views can be iterated over to yield their respective data and support membership tests. Well, I mean, it's easy enough to. Again, I maybe borrowing issues. We have a list of all of the folders in natural file system order, and now we're handling each one. So what did I say we wanted to do here? We want to look in the keys in the fixed folder to see if any of them match what we're doing here, so that we know. So maybe we'll try a little we might say get folders is equal to a lambda that takes a dict and returns. Oh, it doesn't need to do that. It can just do this, say. But instead of folder dict dot keys, it's d dot keys. And then we'll put that at the top, and then say folders is equal to get folder. Is this even a thing you can do? I assume so. Folder dict. I've never used a lambda that way before. Seems to work. That's neat. I always pass it to something that is inherently calling it for me. So I wasn't sure if there was any magic stuff that has to happen there. And I don't even know if it's a good idea to do it as a lambda when you could just have a little tiny function. But it appears to me that the reason for a lambda is so that you can create simple functions without having to have more than one line of code devoted to them. So that seems like exactly the thing that we want. So if that's the case, then for folder in folders, we're printing the folder that we are considering. That's this one. We want to see if it is similar to any of the parent folders. So we might say stored is equal to get folders in fixed, because that's where we're going to put stuff, right? And then what do? We have that list of folders. We say for stored folder in stored, if folder starts with stored folder break, then we'd say found. Yeah, this is the bit where it starts to get a little doolally, because what's the good way to break out of a thing? Let's just go ahead and. I don't know necessarily. The best way to pull that off. Local variable stored folder referenced before assignment. Okay. So I assume that means it didn't find it, which would not surprise me. I got to think about this a little more logically. I'm sort of getting distracted here. One of the more disheartening things is when you have a good idea for, or you have a good idea, and I don't mean like it's a good idea, but like you have a notion of what you should do, but you have a hard time trying to visualize the steps that you would take to do it. Um, Especially as constrained by the language that you're using, because I would know, for example, in C, I can have a for loop and break at any point and then know by the way that the value was set at the end whether it stopped in the middle or ran off the end of the list. But I don't know if that works in Python. It certainly doesn't always work in Lua because the value is a local variable during the iteration. So maybe that's what's happening here too. I'm not entirely sure. But what we do need to do is compare this against all of the folders that are in the fixed folders array to see if one of them starts with us. And we might actually want to do that in a reverse fashion. Because I'm just thinking initially, and if I run the, well, maybe we don't do it that way, because that's not really something that's going to work. I'll bang that out for time being. The folders are sorted this way. So this is the order that we're handling them in, like so. That means as you go along, the folders are getting longer and longer and longer, theoretically, assuming that they all have the same prefix like they do here. If they don't have the same sort of prefix as this, then they won't be found to be common at all, no matter what order you iterate them in, so that doesn't matter. But if there was a third one that was remote build server slash messages, say, then first we would do this one, then we would do this one, then we would do messages. So the question becomes, do we want to go from the bottom up to make sure we find the longest possible match, or do we just go from the top down? Because if we found something that worked like this, then we would have removed it out of the list entirely and it would be inside that one, so this length isn't actually here. I think logically that doesn't actually matter. So we can probably go ahead and say, we're going to iterate, well, let's comment what we're doing here. Iterate over all of the folders in the folder dict. Then we say check to see if any of the folders in the output that we're creating, or we're coalescing, oh, that's too far, and it's spelled wrong. It's on the bubble, so I think it's going to wrap. Check to see if any of the folders in the output that we're coalescing are common with this folder. If so, okay, and then we would do something, and then we would say this is no common folders exist. Just add this key directly to the output as is, in which we would say fixed for folder is equal to folder dict for folder, right? Which, as of right now, is just going to do that. So if I actually, we'll go back to pprint for now and print fixed, even though that's not what we're returning. Then when we run it, we end up with this ridiculous pile of stuff here, where there's the 2018 and there's the 2018 remote build server. So essentially those two dictionaries are the same. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to try something over Python diff to dictionaries. I don't think there's a sane way to do that. Just for keys, which would tell us only the top level one. So we're not going to worry about that for the time being. But I would imagine that that is actually the way it is. Otherwise, we would do the other part of this. So the first thing we need to worry about is, this is the common case, or the first key that we do is always going to do this. The next thing is to see if any of the folders in the output that we're coalescing are common with this folder. Now, here we could say common is equal to none. And if this is the case, then we could say common is equal to folder and then break. And if common, or actually maybe we might say common is not none, then print %s is common with %s and throw in stored folder and common as the thing that's printed. And then just add the key as is, and we'll temporarily turn that off. Let's say we'll even go like so. Else print %s has no common keys, and that is just folder, I guess. That was probably what this one was supposed to be too, right? Yeah. So if I run it, are we still seeing stuff appear there? Oops. What did I do? Come back. Something somewhere is still printing something that I am not interested in it printing. Oh, this thing. There we go. So what do we see? Home tmartin local source Devember has no common keys, and home tmartin local source Devember 2018 remote build server is common with remote build server. Oh, I accidentally printed the same thing twice. This should probably be stored folder. How about that? Remote build server is common with that. Okay. We might actually also go like this. And then the third thing is, what was the output there? The first one is the long one. So folder sliced at the length of common. Is that the correct order for that? Yes. So now this one has no common keys, and this one is the remote build server is common with this, and the part that's different is that, which is the information that we wanted. Right? So this is the bit where I don't know, is this the way to do that? Does this get mad? Yes, because local variable stored folder is referenced before assignment. So I'm going to say, I probably don't know what I'm talking about, but that makes this magic. So we actually want to pull that. And I assume this could actually be a little smarter, like so. Just to make that a little nicer. Whoa, that is not the key that I expected it to be. There we go. For folder in folders, maybe we change this to fixed folder in get folders fixed if folder starts with fixed folder, common is fixed folder break. And if it has no common keys, that's the part where we do this, right? Yeah. If common is none, then do this. And then there's the else, where we do this part instead. And all things being equal, I'm really tempted to put a continue in there just so that this code doesn't have to be bunged out for quite so far. But we see home local source has no common keys, so it's just directly fixed, and remote build server is common with. Now, I think if we were to put that back temporarily, we'd see that when we look at this, that Devember 2018 is in here, but it's the only thing that's in here. The other top level folder isn't because we had extra code. So that's kind of doing what we want. What would be it's not the common prefix because I want to get the opposite of the common prefix. We may say suffix is equal to folder len common, like so. So this part becomes suffix. And I'm going to comment that out again just for the time being so we can see that remote build server is common with that. Python strip leading path separators. Is there like a nice way to do that? Split it? Nah. OS path, rel path. Full path is book HTML, wa, foo, bar, print, rel path of full path to book HTML. Yeah, no, that's not going to do anything near what I am interested in. I guess probably just that whole. If what we're getting is coming out of the system that we're getting it out of, which is full file names, I assume that the path always works that way. So we might L strip and os.pathsep. Is that the right character? No. Oh, I can never remember what the other one of those is. Python path separator character. What the hell is it called? I don't want to use path join. I want to know. Oh, it's just sep. That's irritating. We're not going to do that here. We're just going to go ahead and, well, you know what? We will. Just to let us know. And Windows uses the other kind of file separator, but it will accept the POSIX style. Mac OS is automatically going to use the POSIX style. Linux is automatically going to use the POSIX style as well, but we currently don't have any fixed path type action that makes all paths be POSIXy, which is something it would have to do on Windows. So before this actually works on another system, we'll have to fiddle with that, but for the time being, we're not testing that. So that's one thing. Now, the common part is remote build server, which is the last path component in this particular case, but we don't know how many path components there might be. There could be more than one. But that's finding that for us. Now, what did I say we wanted to do if that was the case? We want to move the stuff from folder dict at folder into a new dictionary is basically what we want to do. In that case, we might say fixed. If we look at that, fixed Oh, we don't want to do fixed common. We need the dictionary for fixed common, just so that we can work on stuff. So patch, the patch directory is going to be the fixed folder at the common key. This is the dictionary we're going to put items into. And then we also need a source, which is folder dict at folder. That's the one that we're putting in. The source of all of our entries. Now, this is going to unequivocally clobber over anything, and I can't see currently how that's a problem because, well, I mean, it's possible for you to have included Devember 2018 in its entirety and then also try to have a top level folder that's split out. There's no reason why this one has to exclude. This one could include remote build server, and that could also just have remote build server there, in which case it's gathering all the files twice. But if the root folder is the same, then the results should be identical either way. So at least for now, we're going to say that's probably not something that's that big of a deal. And then we can say for entry in source, what do we want to do? Now here, we're going to print entry just so we can see it happening. And it's got the names of files that are in that remote build server, right? So the new entry is equal to entry plus, no, it is equal to os.path.join suffix, which is an unfortunate name, and entry. And then if we printed new entry, what we see down there is the files as they would have appeared in that one thing, right? And the other part of that is source entry. So we can see, is an unfortunate thing. This is the new name, and the old entry is that. So we would need to fiddle that as well. So we might want to do that. Then we don't need to do this, and it all happens in one shot. Thusly, which appears to be identical. Now, I imagine it's probably safe to fiddle the dictionary that's the value of a key because the dictionary itself isn't actually changing. So if that was the case, for entry data in source items, get a new name. Then we might say data name is equal to new entry, like so. Now that and that have the same name. And then we could say patch new entry is equal to data. I think, as ugly as that is, that actually does something. So if I was to do that, we just see those two status things there. But if I uncomment fixed, now we see what? It has 2018 and it has all the stuff that used to be in that folder. There's net test, network, remote build. And then we see also in this is remote build server / build client, and it has a last modified time, and there's the name fixed up, and there's the hash that it had before, which I would imagine 21B, if we looked up here, it's right here, 21B, so it's the same stuff. So we have actually fixed the thing. So now if we actually returned fixed instead of folder dict and came all the way down to the bottom and put this back in place, when we run this thing, even though there are two folders, we see an entry that says has no common keys and that, and then we see all of the stuff from the top level, and then we see the remote build server stuff being included in there as well. So there you go. Pretty much the way I expected it to work, but I got a little in my head there. Now, this part sort of bothers me. We might leave well enough alone and just remove that. So let's see. Scan over all of the folders currently in the output to see if any have a common path component with us. To see if any, yeah, okay, let's see. Scan over all of the folders currently in the new output to see if any of them are wholly used as our path prefix. And whoops, refold that. And then if this is the case, if we didn't find one, whoa, copy these files over directly. We might actually say coalescing. Is that spelled right? Perhaps coalescing 0 into 1, and we'll format that, and we're coalescing suffix into what? What order do these come in? Again, I want to make sure that I do it right. Common with the second one, which is, yeah, common. Should have known. And, okay. Alias, the dictionary that we are going to patch our items into. Oh, whoops. Alias, the dictionary we are going to copy items from, and the dictionary we're going to copy them to. And we might even change that and change patch to dest. We might change this to source, this to dst. Now here we can maybe say name and info. Maybe we do that and dest new entry name is equal to new entry, like so. Now it looks a little nicer than what we had. We say we don't need to do that per se. Yeah, we don't want to comment on that. That seems like it's going to make perfect sense. If comment is none, that seems to be a total thing. Now, I might also coalesced is that, and folders is that. We maybe change that to, oh, too far. Undo that one. It's only reference in those two places. Then we'll call it folder list. And as a matter of fact, we won't even do that. We'll just do this. This is an example of something that I should have checked in before I started fiddling with it. As long as I don't quit and restart Sublime, I can always undo back to a known good state. Um, Now the question remains, do we need to do this? If the order that we're iterating them in is in a known state, this could just be a list of items. But at the same time, imagine once we add a new entry, we're maybe not going to coalesce it anymore. We'll leave well enough alone for that purposes because this is too long to want to put in more than one anyway. And when we run it, we still seem to get a nice result. And we actually get a little message there that says coalescing remote build server into home team Martin local source. Okay, and maybe I might actually even do a little bit of that type action. That might look just a slightly nicer. That should actually be a logged thing, but we're not doing anything with that. So that was almost an hour of fiddling right there, which may slow down our ability to do the other part. So maybe that means when we come into doing this tomorrow, we just start in on working on the conversation between the client and the server and not necessarily worrying about the patchy type stuff. I suppose we'll have to see. Um, that is imported specifically to make that work and coalesce folders. So let's say, now again, if we had just a list of every file with an absolute name, maybe there's a way that's more succinct than this to just, instead of have them separated by the folder and the relative names, maybe there's a way to pluck out the common chunks of relative common prefix, because there is this, if we go way up here, can I go to the top? Oh yeah, it's going to be a dip, isn't it? I probably want this one. Whoa. I don't know why that's there. Common prefix. There's totally a path function for that. The longest path in prefix taken character by character, that is a prefix of all paths in list. If list is empty, return the empty string. Now, do you imagine that works real good for this? Whoops, it's os.path.common path, right? No, it's just os.com. I've already forgotten. Common prefix, common prefix. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Of that, okay, we need to pass it a list. So what if we passed it home T Martin test 1 and home T Martin test 2? Handy. The common prefix is that. That's actually more information than we technically want. We could probably know. I mean, that tells us the common path at any rate. We can figure out that that test part is actually part of the file name. So that's something we could do. What if this was home T Martin project test1.txt? Look, now it knows that's that. That's exactly what we want to do in this case. Then it would tell us that the common prefix is home T Martin. So we know that one file is test text and the other one is project test1.txt. That works pretty good. What if one of them was home T Martin test text and one of them was temp bob test1.txt? And oh, the common prefix is slash. So that's good. Now there'll be one path and a whole bunch of files in it. I mean, maybe that's actually what we want when we get to the actual build, because it does mean that the file structure that's inside the cache would literally be laid out with ridiculous path depth, possibly, but it would more or less mimic That's something to look at later. I don't personally like this because it makes all these file names way too long. And I don't know of a good algorithm to figure out, like, do you split the path sort the list, split it in half, and try to, or in quarters, and try to refine and see if you can come up with. There are a lot of files with home to Martin, so let's use that for one. And for the ones that are remaining, how many are in temp? And then, that sort of thing. Um, we'll comment that out for the time being so that it just prints the result, and jump over to here. So we're going to stage this hunk here, and we're going to stage this hunk here. And say implement disparate folder coalescing. This implements a function that can take a dictionary of build files and coalesce, word of the day, any common folders away. For example, if there are two folders and one of them has an absolute path that is wholly contained inside the second, then the items from the second are moved into it and their relative names are changed. This essentially cuts down as much as possible the list of paths that are a part of the build to only the most essential, and reconstruct the on-disk layout in cases where the sidebar has purposefully split a project folder into multiple top-level entries. I try not to do any commits in streams if I can help it, because who wants to watch that? But there are certain things that need to be done, and who say use the new coalesce function. This uses the recently added coalesce function to attempt to fix up the output of the folder search as much as is possible. Okay. So that's a fair bit of good work there. Now the next thing would be to make the operations dictionary, where we take two of these and try to compare back and forth across them to see what might be different. And that is, I mean, not entirely. I'm going to clean this bit up perhaps, because I'm thinking we might need to have a stashed copy of something, and then modify this part down here to use it instead of getting the data from the thing, so that we'll have a smaller list of things to deal with. Say the files here. I think that's a nice way to go. And we still have, well, I am at an hour. I do got a few minutes. So let's go ahead and cut those out. And we'll say test folder is equal to, okay, and we'll just say nothing there for the time being. And we'll come down here. And instead of folders being none, folders will be just that and that and remote build server. And we'll even throw that part out because we don't care. Now, now when I run it, the results are just the files from the remote build server. So I should be able to snag that all the way down to here, copy it, and drop it in up here. And now test folder is this. There's a lot of things are misspelled in there, but nevertheless, that totally does something. Okay. And yeah, we'll leave well enough alone. We're pretty, if we don't have that, we probably don't want that. I think we're pretty clear on pruning folders having worked and whether or not we should keep files. We clean that up nicely and we end up with something kind of nice there, and we'll throw that into a commit. We will stage this, all that and that. So we'll stage that and say set up test framework for file set diffing. Okay, so that's nice. This sets up our test command to be able to have, a known set of files that we can diff against in order to see what sort of changes we need to transmit to the other end, if any, in order to bring them in sync with us. Okay. Whoops. That is not what I meant to do. I meant to commit that. And there we have that. Now we'll throw in the one thing. We'll see how much we can get in here. We might call this what? Def. This is actually not one of these little helpery type things. This is actually something that would be used by something. So we'll do it down here. And we'll call it calculate file set deltas. Us, them, and we'll return just an empty dict and say given two file set dictionaries, one representing our files and one representing their files. This returns back a dictionary that indicates what files need to be added, removed, or updated in order to make their files match ours. And we'll go ahead and reflow that. And now we know we are getting our files, right? So I'm going to dupe that out. And if I said dift is equal to calculate file set deltas, and our files are files, and their files are, is that what I called that? The test folder stuff. Then we could print this, and what we actually want to print is diff. And when we run it, we get an empty dictionary. All right, so good. And we might actually further stage those changes because they are part of setting up the test framework and amend the previous commit. And notice I do that quite a bit. Now, we need to iterate over all folders. So for folder in us, this is the bit where it gets kind of tricky. If folder not in them, then this entire folder does not appear on in their list. So we might actually want to have a diff is equal to dictionary and return diff like so. So if case 1, this folder doesn't appear, well, we might actually say, we'll change this to our folder in us, and then we'll say their folder is equal to them.get our folder and none. And then we can say if their folder is none, then what do we do in that case? We say, well, actually, we might even go so far as to say added is a dictionary, and add remove is a dictionary, and modify is a dictionary. Let's just say that just automatically, and maybe we'll fix that so it doesn't explode in our face. And yeah, that's the result set of nothing. Okay, so we have to iterate over every folder in our file set, and then we try to find the result, the same folder in their file set. And if their folder is none, then what do? This folder is something we have that they don't have. So we would say diff added dot update with the dictionary entries. Okay. Yeah, we'll leave well enough alone for that, and we'll say with us our folder. You can always remember, as we did before, we can always clean this up and remove that, say. So okay, so yeah, that actually is printing nothing because that's actually the same, right? So if I change this to that, key error added. Oh, yeah. I just finished saying, let's say, and then I didn't say it. Okay. So now what's our result? Our result is that we should add absolutely everything in that folder. So good. That case seems to work. This, of course, needs like a lot of testing after the fact. This is just sort of the first crack. Yeah. Okay, so now we end up with that bit, right? We're way down here. I can see the yellow. We might actually even say continue here. So if we get here, then this folder actually is there. So our files, oh, maybe we might even, this is the part where we might say our files in us.items. Let's say. Now we don't need an our files here. Their folder is that, and if their folder is none, then do that and continue. Otherwise, their files is equal to them.get their folder. I mean, realistically, we know they're the same, but it keeps the code nicer to look at, right? And unhashable type dict. I'm not going to lie, that seems... Yeah, well, be jigged. That is actually... These go in the order opposite to what I expect them to be. X is equal to 1, 1. first one is the key and the second one is the value, right? So what idiotic mistake is going to tell me that it's about time to go ahead and end this stream and continue around on this tomorrow now that we've actually started on it? Which gives me a little time to try to decide what it is that I want to do. So I do not know, but we're going to run it one more time just to see. So our folder and our files and us items, their folder is their get whatever our folder is with the value of none. If their folder is none, then copy it over, which we know works. When I print their, oh, that's right, their should be their files, isn't it? We're essentially getting their file. Yeah, okay. I think that's the attention I had in mind. Their files is getting the contents of our folder for the same thing out of them. And if there isn't one, then we just go ahead and cram our stuff in at that folder because they don't have it. Otherwise, we totally have their files. We don't need to do anything. And as such, their files are that, which is the same as ours, and nothing needs to happen. Now is the diffy part. Where we know that these are both here. So first we need to find files in one, not in the other, and next we need to find files in them, not in us, and then find the intersection. So our set is equal to a set constructed of our files dot keys. No, it's a dictionary, isn't it? Let's go ahead and print, print our file, because I'm already getting confused, and print their files, and then we'll comment out both of those. And when we do it, so it is a dictionary with keys and values. Okay, so that will do what we want. We'll comment both of those out because we're probably going to need to do that again. And yeah, we don't need that one because we just added it. Our set is the set of our files keys, and their set is equal to the set of their files keys, which totally works. And if we printed our set and print their set, then when we do it, after we save, we can see the two names of files are identical. Now, in order to get this to do something that we understand, we're going to change this to build client 1. So when we do it, they are slightly different. And because I can never quite remember how these set operations work, we might print our set minus their set, which gives us files we have, they don't. And similarly, we can print their set minus our set, which I'm assuming gives files they have, we don't, which is that one. And I think we can also say print our set and their set, which is files we both have. And the result of that is everything except build client, because that's the one that's not there. So those are all the bits that we need, right? So that's actually pretty simple, I'll say. So say iterate over all of our folders. This doesn't cover the case where they have a folder we don't have, but that we'll worry about that at a later date. This will be take 1, if you will. Okay, so iterate all of our folders. Okay, get the set of files for them in this folder. If it doesn't exist, then we need to add all of the files for this folder directly, and that's all we have to worry about. Okay. Now we get the sets of files, which we know works. So files we have that they don't, then we might say for file in our set minus their set. This is in their files, right? We want diff add, because we're adding files we have that they don't have to the result. And if that was the case, how do you add the update? Is that what I just did a second ago while I remembered how this worked for dictionaries? Because append is for dictionaries, so update is for something else. Well, not that one. Yeah, that line that's just right where I was actually looking. With some, and no, does this actually take a dict? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Add the file is equal to our files file, I would say. We'll go ahead and push that up there just as a little thing. So add files we have and they don't. And the result of that is that we are telling this that we want them to add build client because they don't have that file. Good. Remove files they have and we don't. That's the exact same thing in the reverse direction, right? So we would copy that and paste that. For file in their set minus our set, then diff remove file is equal to their files file. Now the operation says we should add build client to them, and they should remove build client 1 because they don't have that file anymore. And what's left is files that we both have. Update any files we both have that have changed. For file in our set and their set, here's we need to say ours is equal to our files file, and theirs is equal to their files file. And in order to test this, we actually need to change a couple of things here. We're going to change this one to have a different modification time. We don't care about their modification time so much as their hashes. So let's say for them, extension.cs, we find all of the E's, and change them into A's just to make it different. And in main, we find all of these C's and change them into F's. Just so there's a couple whose hashes are different. And then we'll know extension and main. Okay. So we might say this file does not appear locally. And, well, no, not even. Well, we want that so that we know the hash on, whoops, the hash on this is wrong, and the hash on this is wrong. And we might actually say different on purpose and jump back down to here. So we get our file and we get their file, and we can say if ours. Now I've already forgotten what that stupid field is. It's SHA-1, right? Yeah. Not MD5. I say that a lot. If, oh, maybe we don't even need those things. If our file's file SHA-1 is not the same as their file's file SHA-1, and again, I'll just go ahead and fix both of those in at once, shall I? Then dift modify dot file is equal to, we're putting our file there, so our files file, and that should actually be one of those, and that goes away. And what are we telling them now? That they should add that folder because we don't have it. They should modify that folder because, modify those two files in, well, something, we haven't quite got this ready just yet. Modify those files because we don't have them, or we have them and they're different, I should say. And here you remove that file. So that is more or less what we want for that. Now, what we actually wanted is a dictionary whose top level key is the folder, so that on a folder by folder basis, we know what needs to be added, removed, and modified. We are really going long on this one. I'm at 1 hour and 23 minutes, but I'm down with that. How do we want to change this? I think what we want to do is, we can't continue per se. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put that there. So that's a list of diff stuff. Now we're going to need a results. We'll say file deltas is equal to a dictionary, and diff is equal to that, and then file deltas for our folder is equal to that diff array. Then we go through all of this, and we get to the bottom, we return file deltas. So now the dictionary looks the same, but now it has a top level key that is that. Now the next question becomes, what if this was build servers, like so? Then what do we get told? We get told something that is not quite right here, because we're saying for build server, add everything, which I guess is not really. Oh yeah, this is what we want. We're telling the server, I forgot the order of operations. We're telling the server, these are the files we have in this folder. You don't have them, so you add all of them, modify none, remove none. That is what we want to have happen. Now, the last thing that we need to do here, if we jump right down here, and I say last thing like I'm sure that this is actually going to work. This says for all folders that we have, make sure that changes, add entries to tell the other end how to create or update their copies of these folders. And away we go, right? So we've created that. We aliased that. So this is the diffs just for this particular thing. And maybe we might actually do this a different way just for clarity. We might actually do this and then say diff is equal to file deltas. Whoops. Our folder. Which gives us the same result at the end, but it's clearer that we're creating an alias for the thing. Then we go through. So this, for every folder we have, this says add these files, delete those files. These files changed from what you have. What this leaves out is this. For all folders that the remote end has, if we don't have them, tell the remote end to remove them now. For their folders, their files in their .items. As per se. And, ooh, that's unhappy. What did I, that's a them, isn't it? So when we look at the result, that is the path they have that we don't, which was remote build servers. And what did we have here? We only need to do something if their folder not in us print their folder, their files. I think that should be, because that's what we used here. Our folder, our files. I'm gonna dump that out like so. So their folder, their files in them items. If their folder is not in us, then we're gonna print it. Maybe. What the hell did we? Oh, they don't have one of those. Oh, right. I fixed the I fixed the case. So again, that is printing that particular folder. Now that's a folder we want to add to our key, to our top level thing, and we're just going to have a delete item that says delete all of these files. I don't know that it necessarily needs all of that information to do it, but I don't think it, at this stage, it doesn't hurt. We don't actually know what we need. If their folder is not in us, then what do we actually want to say? We want to say for file deltas in their folder is equal to, well, I mean this, right? It's just their folder and not our folder because it's a file. It's a folder they have that we don't. And maybe we'll even indent it so that it works. We do that. Oh, I think we might even just say remove is their files. That seems pretty simplistic. So what do we have here? We say for remote build server, remove build client 1 and extensions and main and all of that stuff. That is Oh, right, that should be their folder. I specifically said it when I copied it, for creep's sake. I'm going to clear the console, make sure we're at the very bottom, and run it again so we can roll back and see it in all of its potential glory. So now, if for the remote build server, we want to add this file and basically every single file because they don't have it. We don't have any to modify, we don't have any to remove. For the folder this, which is something they have and we don't have, we don't care about that and we don't care about that, but you feel free to remove your 3 crunky files that are different than the ones we have, plus every other file as well. And just for verification purposes, if this was actually set back to build server again, and if I again, well, this time we'll do this a bunch of times so we see the split and run it and go back, it's still printing stuff that it perhaps doesn't need to while it's doing stuff. But now we know that for remote build server, please add build client. Please modify extensions in main because the hashes are different. And please remove build client 1 because we renamed it on our end. And that's all that it has to do. So if we were to find places where we're printing stuff that, and again, we'll maybe just leave that commented out because until we know, but that is actually I think a fairly nice diff implementation, which hopefully isn't too naive. It's certainly good enough to get us going. For files, it does the add, removes, and modifies for files we have and they have to bring them into sync. And if we had a folder and they didn't, we just add them all. And then at the end, if they have a folder we don't, we tell them to remove it. And so with that, one more run gives us the nice tight version of things that we want. So I will be really sad about how I blew my timeline by 15 minutes and stage this file and say commit message here. But I will totally do that after I end the stream because nobody needs to see that. But there'll be a commit here and a tag in just a second pushed up. And by just a second, I mean by the time, if you're watching this live, it'll take a few minutes. If you're watching this after the archive is popped, it's there, unless I fell asleep on the couch waiting for video encodes to happen. But this is exactly all I wanted to get done for tonight, and we went a little long, or I went a half an hour longer than I intended to, because I was sort of stalled out my brain on the best way to do the first part of that operation. But we are now set to actually try the scary operation of starting to talk to our remote build. Now that's going to mean for the next few days while we're working on that, we're probably popping in and out between our Python code in the package and the server code in C# so that we can tweak it, and we're going to create new message types and make sure we can handle them on both ends. We're going to try to get files going over there. The next immediate goal for however many days that it takes, hopefully not too many, is getting all of the mechanics in place so that we can hold a conversation with the remote end using messages and our custom protocol and synchronize files from us to them. And as a bonus, if it's easy, maybe get them to be able to transmit files from them to us. But that is something that's not necessarily needed for right now. Being able to see what files they have is more interesting than any of that. And hopefully we have all of the Lego pieces we need to build our little house of file transfer. But we will find out on Devember the 17th. And until then, please have a sublime day.